Welcome back. The head of the Canadian province of Ontario is, listen to this, threatening to cut off electricity exports to the United States. Premier Doug Ford says he will turn off the power supply to 3 U.S. states, this in protest of President Trump's recently imposed tariffs. Ford's government is already committed to applying a 25% surcharge on energy exports to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call spoke to the Ontario Premier late this afternoon and joins me now. Chanel, great to see you. So as I understand it, Ontario, largest manufacturer of car parts in Canada. What impact could this 30-day delay in the tariffs on those auto parts have?
Well, Major, great to be with you. I mean, the Premier has been vocal about this issue of automotive tariffs leading up to this announcement today about this pause. Basically, he says it's going to hurt people on both sides of the border. And that's because car plants here in the U.S. heavily rely on parts from Canada and Mexico. And the way this works, explained by Olivia earlier today as well, is that these parts will go back and forth several times before a car is actually made and sold here in the U.S. And essentially what that means is the price of these cars could skyrocket if the parts keep getting slapped with tariffs every time they cross the border. So I spoke to the Premier about what this 1-month pause means today. He said, leading up to this announcement from the White House, he had a phone call with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He believes that phone call, at least in part, played a part, that is, in this 1-month pause. Listen.
The tone is, nothing's for sure right now, and that's very concerning. You know, as I always say, the only country that's benefiting from this squabble, if you want to call it that way, that is China. You know, as China is flooding markets around the world, undercutting American and Canadian workers, and they're sitting back laughing, watching the two closest friends and allies fight a tariff war.
So, Major, in case you're wondering why a Premier of Ontario has a seat at the bargaining table during these trade discussions, it's because Ontario is super important. The Premier of Ontario is sort of like a governor here in the U.S., but Ontario is key because it's such a huge trade partner with the U.S. It is the nation's largest economy in Canada, home to some pretty big industries, not just automotive, but manufacturing and technology as well. It is also super populated. 40% of Canadians live in Ontario.
So, Chanel, Ontario can play a big role in this, not just conceptually, but economically, practically. What other steps is the Premier either thinking about or already set in motion?
Well, he's already committed to banning American companies from bidding on Ontario infrastructure projects, also removing American alcohol from store shelves. We've already seen this happen today, and canceling a $100 million deal with Elon Musk's Starlink internet provider. And he says he is open to cutting off electricity to 3 bordering American states. Listen.
As President Trump is, trying to get his tax cuts and other areas, he's really just creating chaos. There's one person responsible for that, and that's President Trump.
And, Major, I spent a decade covering politics in Canada before moving to the U.S., and I have to say, this is extraordinarily spicy, what we're seeing, this rhetoric in Canadian politics. We saw Premier Ford the last couple of weeks wearing this hat that reads Canada Not for Sale. He's been doing that at recent news conferences, and it comes on the heels of his re-election in Ontario, where a lot of people say he may have won because of this tough on Trump stance. We also heard from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau yesterday using really blunt and curt language. He actually also addressed the President Donald Trump by his first name, Donald.
And Chanel, based on your experience covering Canadian politics, does this feel to you like maybe not a tipping point, but a sort of reassessment across Canada about its relationship with the United States, and if not the United States generally, with the Trump administration specifically?
The timing here is so key because historically these two nations have been so intertwined culturally and, of course, economically as well. And we are starting to see a divide. I think, I'm hearing anecdotally a lot of Americans do think this notion of Canada becoming a 51st state may be a joke. But Canadians, many of them are not receiving it this way. A lot of people are taking this as a serious threat. As a result, we're seeing a lot of nationalism sort of emerge in Canada. And if you ask how, you might remember there were a lot of boos to the American national anthem at the last couple of big sports events between the two countries. There are also Canadians who are now boycotting American goods. And Major, there are tons of Canadians who will ordinarily come to Florida to spend the winter here. They are not doing that this year.
Great perspective and reporting. Chanel Call, thanks so much.
Thank you.